Hey everyone. Tonight, we begin with something that feels like a storm creeping in from the horizon. The kind of storm you don't see until it's already overhead, cracking open the sky. You might not survive this one. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And don't forget to drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing how our little circle stretches across the world. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room when my phone buzzed. The plastic chair creaked as I shifted to answer it. The caller ID read Angela, my only daughter. For a moment, I smiled. Maybe she was checking in, the way she had been doing since Robert died. But the moment I pressed accept, I heard a voice that sounded nothing like hers. Mom, we're going on a trip to Europe tomorrow. I already sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money. Bye. The line clicked dead. That was it. My daughter's voice, cold as a draft in an empty room. She didn't wait for me to speak, didn't pause for breath,
didn't even stumble over her words. 45 years of raising her, sacrificing for her, staying up nights when she was working so she could have nice clothes, reduced to a sentence and a dial tone.
I sat frozen in that ugly green chair, surrounded by strangers with coughs and runny noses. Yet I felt completely alone. My daughter had just thrown me away like a torn grocery bag, and instead of crying, because that's what I'd been doing for months since Robert's heart gave out over morning coffee, I smiled. Not the kind of smile that says I'm fine. No, this one was different. A smile that carried the weight of something buried. Because Angela didn't know what I knew. My name is Antonia Brooks. I'm 71 years old. And up until that phone call, I thought I understood my daughter. I thought she loved me in her own imperfect way. Turns out, she loved convenience. My Robert had died 6 months earlier. One morning, just like all the others, we sat at our little breakfast table. He poured my coffee, always cream, never sugar, handed me a slice of toast, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Good morning, my love." Those were his last words. By the time I looked up from buttering my toast, his face had gone pale, his chest heavy. The heart that had carried me through 45 years of marriage stopped beating before the ambulance even arrived. Since then, Angela had shown up like clockwork. Grocery trips, doctor appointments, the funeral arrangements. She played the role of the dutiful daughter so well that I never noticed the performance. She even told me to take better care of myself, Mom. You have to eat more vegetables now that you're alone, she'd say with that smile. the smile I thought meant love. It didn't. It meant calculation. The beach house she sold. That wasn't just a vacation property. Robert and I had bought it when Angela was 15. It was our sanctuary after years of long shifts and tight budgets. Every summer, we packed the truck and drove down, grilling fish on the porch, decorating a Christmas tree that smelled of ocean salt, watching Angela bring boyfriends, then Edward. My role, cooking, cleaning, laundry, always making sure her visits were comfortable. I thought the house held memories. She saw only dollar signs. And the truck, Robert's Ford pickup. That thing was practically his third child. He polished it every Sunday, humming an old Johnny Cash tune, changed the oil with a reverence usually reserved for holy objects, and always parked it beneath the same tree. Even after his death, his scent lingered in the upholstery, a mix of aftershave and black coffee, and Angela sold it like it was just scrap metal. That was the moment I should have collapsed into grief. But instead, something shifted. Maybe wisdom finally replaced sorrow. They say that with age comes a kind of strange clarity. You see not just the surface, but the shape of everything behind it. Well, sitting in that waiting room, I suddenly remembered a detail I had locked away in my grief. 3 days before Robert died, he handed me a manila envelope. "Antonia," he had said, "put this in your dresser drawer. If something happens to me, open it when you feel ready." I had tucked it away, distracted by funeral directors and condolences, and forgotten, until Angela's betrayal cracked me open wide enough to remember. The nurse called my name, breaking my trance. The doctor gave me a clean bill of health, good blood pressure, strong heart. Just eat more greens and rest. I nodded politely, but my mind was already back home, picturing the envelope. By the time I stepped onto the bus, since apparently my car no longer existed, I felt almost amused. Angela thought she'd left me with nothing. But Robert, my planner, my quiet strategist, had always been 2 steps ahead. The bus hummed along, the city rushing past in blurred storefronts and faces, everyone carrying invisible burdens. Mine was waiting in a dresser drawer. When I walked through my front door, I didn't even take off my coat. Straight to the bedroom, straight to the drawer. And there it was. Manila envelope, Robert's neat handwriting spelling out my name. My hands shook as I lifted it, heavy with more than paper. The sky outside darkened, shadows lengthening in the corners of the room. I sat on our bed, the bed that still carried the imprint of his side, and opened it as if it were a birthday gift. Inside, folded and crisp, lay documents that would change everything. And Robert's handwriting familiar, steady, full of love, spelled out truths I wasn't prepared for. The first thing I noticed was the smell of the paper. Strange. I know, but it carried that faint, musty sweetness of something kept hidden for years. Robert had always been meticulous. Even in death, he found a way to make me feel as though he was still in control, still steering the wheel of our little family. I pulled out the documents one by one, spreading them on the bed like puzzle pieces. At first, I couldn't make sense of them: deeds, bank certificates, titles, but then my eyes caught the handwriting I knew so well. My dear Antonia, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Forgive me for not telling you everything while I was alive. I wanted to protect you from worry. Over the years, I invested our savings in properties and businesses. We don't just have the beach house. We have 6 other properties, including the apartment building where Angela and Edward live. We also have shares in 3 companies worth more than you can imagine. You are rich, my love. You always were. I set the letter down, stunned. My pulse thundered in my ears. Robert, a city bus driver for 40 years, had somehow built an empire right under my nose. I laughed out loud, an awkward, shaky laugh that startled me in the quiet bedroom. How had I missed this? The man who brought home coupons for 2-for-1 milk, who refused to upgrade the television because this one still works, had been quietly multiplying every penny we'd ever saved. As I shuffled through the papers, I saw it clearly. There was a deed to a downtown condo, a small motel along the coast, several family homes in neighborhoods I recognized, and yes, even the 20-story apartment building Angela lived in. Robert had signed it all under the name of a company I'd never heard of. But according to these documents, I was the sole heir. I clutched the papers to my chest and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. All those years I thought we were barely scraping by. And here, Robert had been playing chess while the rest of us thought it was checkers. And then, almost as if he were sitting right there, his wisdom whispered in my mind, if Angela knew, she would change. She wouldn't love us for us, but for the money. Well, wasn't that the bitterest irony? Angela had already cast me aside, thinking I was penniless. She had no idea that she had been standing on the very gold mine she thought didn't exist. That night, I couldn't sleep. I padded through the house in my slippers, touching the old furniture, running my fingers along the walls Robert painted himself, staring at family photos that now felt like relics of a life I wasn't sure ever truly existed. One photo in particular stopped me cold. Angela, at 5 years old, perched on Robert's lap, giggling with her whole face. Where had that little girl gone? When had she turned into someone who could sell her parents' memories without flinching? I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, the steam fogging my glasses, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the stack of papers. It was like holding a secret map, one that led not to treasure, but to freedom. But here's the thing about freedom. It's only useful if you know what to do with it. The next morning, the phone rang. Angela. Her voice was softer this time, syrupy, but I could hear the rehearsed edge. Mom, we already transferred the money from the house and the car. We deposited your share into your account. It's not much, but it'll help you for a few months while you look for something smaller." "My share?" I asked, pretending confusion. "Yes, Mom. We obviously weren't going to leave you with nothing. We gave you 30%. That's fair, right? Edward needs the rest for an incredible business opportunity in Europe." 30% of my own house, of Robert's truck. The generosity dripped like poison. "How thoughtful," I said quietly. "And when do you leave?" "This afternoon. Bags are packed. We'll be gone at least 6 months, maybe more." There was a pause. "But don't worry, Mom. When we get back, we'll help you find a small apartment. Something that fits your needs." Fits my needs? As if she had the faintest clue what those were. I smiled into the phone. "Have a safe trip." "Angela," she exhaled with relief. "I knew you'd understand. Mom, you've always been so compassionate. We love you so much." Click. I stood there, holding the silent phone, and for the first time in months, I laughed. A sharp, absurd, unstoppable laugh that bubbled up until I had tears streaming down my face. Because the situation was so grotesque. It was almost comedy. Angela thought she had stripped me bare, but Robert's voice rang in my head. "You are rich, my love." Later that afternoon, from my window, I watched Angela and Edward load their fancy suitcases into a cab. He struggled with oversized bags. She toted a sleek carry-on. They looked giddy, like two teenagers sneaking away for a joyride. They didn't glance toward my window, didn't wave goodbye. And I thought, good. Leave. Run. Because when you come back, the world you thought you owned won't be yours anymore. That night, as I folded Robert's documents back into the envelope, I made a silent promise I would not waste this secret. I would not let grief turn me into a ghost. My daughter thought she had left me with nothing. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The morning after Angela's grand farewell, the house felt strangely quiet. Not the gentle quiet of peace, but the hollow kind that comes when someone has stolen air from the room. I brewed a pot of coffee, Robert's old habit still stitched into my routine, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the steam curling from the cup. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. There it was, Angela's generosity. A deposit for 30% of what she and Edward claimed was my share. It looked like a decent amount on the screen, maybe even generous to someone else. But I knew the truth. They'd sold the beach house for far less than it's worth, probably to get fast cash. And Robert's truck, his beloved Ford, was listed online at auction prices that made me want to scream. They'd pawned off history for pennies. But it wasn't the numbers that broke me. It was the arrogance. The condescension wrapped in Angela's words. "We'll help you find something smaller, something that fits your needs." My needs. As though she had ever asked what those were. I sat back and thought about what it meant to be 71, a widow, dismissed by your only child. Most people would say it meant weakness, dependency, loneliness. But I felt none of those things. Not anymore. What I felt was clarity. Here's the funny thing about age. They tell you it dulls you, makes you slower, but it also gives you a sharper lens. I suddenly remembered something Robert used to say when Angela was a teenager and throwing tantrums about curfews or boys. Let her push, Antonia. Let her think she's winning. Because one day, she'll realize the only rope she's been pulling on is tied around her own ankles. Sipping my coffee, I realized that day had finally come. Angela and Edward were flying toward their European business opportunity. I pictured them sitting on the plane, sipping complimentary wine. Angela convinced she'd outsmarted me. Edward probably whispering promises of mansions in Paris or vineyards in Tuscany. Neither of them realizing they'd built their castle on quicksand. That afternoon, I decided to walk to the corner market without Robert's truck. I was on foot, which in its own way felt poetic. The sun was bright, the sidewalks cracked with weeds pushing through. Every neighbor I passed gave me that same look they'd been giving since the funeral, half pity, half curiosity, as if wondering how long before Antonia Brooks crumbled completely. I nodded politely, smiled even, but inside, I carried Robert's envelope like armor. When I got back home, I spread the documents across the table again. Titles, deeds, shares, bank statements, a lifetime of hidden work. One paper in particular caught my attention, the deed for the apartment building Angela and Edward lived in. Robert had tucked it neatly between others, but it stood out like a crown jewel. And that's when I thought of something that made me chuckle under my breath. Angela had kicked me out of my own home, yet unknowingly lived under my roof every night for years. She had bragged about owning a condo that wasn't even hers, it was mine. Or rather, Robert's. And now mine. The irony could have been a comedy sketch if it weren't my life. That night, I boiled pasta for dinner, sat alone at the table, and thought about the next move. I could storm into their condo, wave the papers, and throw them out immediately. But no, that wasn't Robert's way, and it wasn't mine either. Wisdom, I remembered, isn't just about what you know, it's about when you reveal it. So I went to bed early, tucked the documents under my pillow like a child hiding candy, and whispered into the darkness, "Robert, I think I know what to do." The next morning, I called the only man I trusted besides Robert, Mr. Peterson, the lawyer who had handled Robert's affairs, the one who'd shaken my hand at the funeral with quiet eyes that seemed to say, "Call me when you're ready."
"Mrs. Brooks," he answered warmly when I introduced myself. "How are you holding up?"
"I've been better," I admitted, then lowered my voice. but I found some papers, important ones, and I think I need your help." There was a pause, a kind of sharpened interest in his tone. "What kind of papers?" "The kind that tell me my husband wasn't just a bus driver. The kind that tell me I own more than anyone realizes." He didn't hesitate. "Come in tomorrow morning. Bring everything with you." I hung up, feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt since Robert died purpose. That night, as I washed the dishes, I thought about Angela again. She and Edward were probably wandering through some European street, snapping photos, sipping lattes in outdoor cafes, oblivious to the wreckage they'd left behind. I imagined her laughing at how clever she'd been, telling Edward, "Mom won't last long on her own." And that's when I started laughing again, quiet at first, then louder, until I had to lean against the counter. Because the truth was, she was right about one thing. I wouldn't last long like this, but not for the reason she thought. I wasn't going to crumble. I was going to rise. And when Angela returned, she wouldn't find the fragile mother she'd dismissed. She'd find someone else entirely, someone who knew the real rules of the game. The next morning, I dressed more carefully than I had in months. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to feel like myself again, the version of me Robert always saw. I slipped into my wine-colored dress, the one he used to say made me look like a queen heading into battle. A little lipstick, a touch of blush. When I looked in the mirror, the tired widow I'd been staring at for half a year seemed to step back, making space for someone sharper, steadier. Mr. Peterson's office was in one of those downtown buildings that still carried the old dignity of marble floors and brass railings, the kind of place Robert would have admired, with his quiet taste for tradition. I held my manila envelope against my chest, like a lifeline as I walked through the revolving doors. Mrs. Brooks. Mr. Peterson greeted me warmly, standing from behind a desk stacked with papers. He was a tall man, a little gray around the edges, with the kind of presence that made you feel both safe and slightly interrogated at the same time. "It's good to see you. Please, sit." I laid the envelope in front of him. My hands trembled just a little as I pushed it toward him. "Robert left these for me. I don't fully understand them." He pulled on his glasses and began reading. At first, his face was calm, polite, but as he flipped page after page, his expression shifted. His brows furrowed, his eyes widened, and finally he leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Mrs. Brooks," he said slowly, This is much more than I expected." Robert wasn't just careful. He was brilliant. "According to these papers, you are the legal owner of several properties across the city, shares in companies that are thriving." And he tapped the deed I had been staring at for hours at home, the entire building where your daughter and son-in-law live. I nodded quietly. I thought that's what it said. He took off his glasses, folding them carefully. To be clear, Angela had no legal right to sell the beach house or your husband's truck. Both were in your name. Those sales are fraudulent. We can undo them, and if you want, we can pursue charges. Charges. The word tasted sour.
Yes, fraud, coercion, possibly even elder abuse. We can take them to court.
I sat very still. The idea of dragging my own daughter through court, seeing her name on legal filings under the word defendant, made my stomach knot. No, I said finally. Not yet. I don't want the law to punish her. I want her to feel what she made me feel. That's something no court can deliver.
Mr. Peterson tilted his head, studying me.
Then what would you like me to do? I want the beach house back. Quietly. I want every property transferred directly into my control. And I want Angela to keep living in that apartment until I decide otherwise. Can you make that happen?
He hesitated, then gave a small smile. It will take some paperwork, but yes, completely feasible. It may take a few weeks.
Good, I said, standing taller in my chair.
And one more thing, Angela cannot know I am behind any of it. Not yet. As you wish, he said with a lawyer's calm. But I noticed a flicker in his eyes, respect, maybe even admiration.
When I left his office, the city looked different. The same streets I'd walked 100 times now felt alive, buzzing with a secret I carried in my bag. I wasn't the abandoned widow Angela thought I was. I was a woman with power, a woman with a plan. I walked past shop windows, past people rushing to work, past children tugging their mothers' hands. And I thought, if only they knew who I really am. That evening, I returned home to the silence of my kitchen. The house felt less empty now, more like a stage waiting for the next act. I laid Robert's documents back on the table and whispered, "It's starting, Robert, the lesson, the one she'll never forget." I thought about Angela again, how she must be sipping wine in Europe, convinced she'd pulled off the perfect heist. She didn't know that her castle was built on sand, and that tide was already rolling in. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. I even dreamed. Robert was there, sitting in his favorite chair, the newspaper folded in his lap. He looked at me over his glasses. That little half smile he always wore when I surprised him. "It's about time, my love," he said. "About time you stood up for yourself." I woke up with tears on my cheeks, but they weren't from sorrow. They were from something deeper, determination. When I looked out the window at the sunrise, I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance, about showing my daughter what it means when you trade love for greed, about teaching her a lesson only life and her mother could teach. The weeks that followed were some of the strangest of my life. On the surface, I played the role everyone expected the poor widow. abandoned by her only daughter, left to shuffle to the market alone and live on pitying glances from neighbors. But beneath that mask, I was quietly rearranging the chessboard Robert had left me. Every morning, I followed the same routine. I'd make coffee in Robert's chipped mug, butter a slice of toast, and sit at the table where his documents were spread like a secret empire. Then, in the afternoons, I would step outside into the sunshine and pretend to be just another elderly woman surviving on limited means. It was like living a double life. Aurora, my neighbor of 40 years, stopped me one day while I was watering the roses in the front yard. "Antonia, honey, is it true? Did Angela really leave for Europe and sell the house and the truck too?" "Yes," I said calmly, as though I were reporting the weather. "She and Edward had business to do over there." Aurora's eyes filled with sympathy. "How are you going to manage? Sweetie, everyone knows Robert didn't leave much money." If only she knew. I smiled, patting her hand. "Don't worry, I'll be fine." She offered to bring me groceries, to cook for me now and then. That was the thing about neighbors, they loved to help as long as it didn't cost them much. I declined, thanking her, knowing that if she discovered the truth, her sympathy would dry up faster than morning dew. Inside, however, I relished the performance. I wasn't just living in shadows, I was thriving there. The same way Robert had lived, quietly stacking investments while everyone assumed we were just scraping by. Maybe secrecy had always been our real inheritance. Mr. Peterson called me regularly with updates. His voice was steady, measured, the kind of reassurance I clung to. "Mrs. Brooks," he said one morning, "we've made progress. The sale of the beach house has been nullified. It's officially yours again." The buyers had no idea it was fraudulent, so they were refunded and released. As for the other properties, the paperwork is being transferred into your name quietly, as you requested. I closed my eyes and let out a long breath. "Excellent, Mr. Peterson. And the building where Angela lives?" "That one is more complicated," he admitted. "Technically, you've always owned it through Robert's company, but we need to update the administrative control so you have direct authority. 2 more weeks, at most." Perfect. 2 weeks was nothing when I had already waited a lifetime. That afternoon, I decided to take a bus ride out to the coast. It had been years since I'd gone alone, but something in me needed to see the beach house again. The moment I stepped off the bus and smelled the salt air, memories came flooding back. Robert grilling fish on the porch, Angela running barefoot on the sand, her hair flying as she laughed. Christmas mornings when the tree leaned slightly because the floorboards were uneven. But nobody cared. It had been our sanctuary. I stood across the street, staring at it. Cream-colored paint, porch, overlooking the waves. Someone had set a few potted plants by the steps, new owners trying to make it theirs. My heart twisted. An older gentleman came outside, squinting at me with curiosity. "Ma'am, are you all right?" "Yes," I said softly, just remembering. "You knew the family who lived here before?" I smiled. "Very well." He nodded sympathetically. "Such a shame what happened. They told us the elderly lady was very sick and had to sell quickly. We thought it was a good deal, but then the lawyers came. Turned out the sale wasn't legal. We got our money back, but we were disappointed. We liked this house." My jaw tightened. Sick. Angela had told people I was sick. That lie stung more than the theft. I wished him well, then walked away before the weight of it crushed me. That night, back in my kitchen, I called Mr. Peterson again. I want Robert's truck back. I told him, "That'll be difficult," he said carefully. "Angela had a power of attorney signed by you. It allowed her to sell it legally." My heart stopped. "That's impossible. I would never." Then I remembered those weeks after Robert's death, when Angela had shoved papers under my nose, telling me they were for funeral expenses, inheritance filings. I'd been so lost in grief I signed without reading. "She tricked me," I whispered. "Mr. Peterson sighed. "We can try to undo it, but it'll be more complicated. We'd have to prove deception." "Then let's prove it," I said, fire rising in my chest. "I want everything back. Every last piece." From that day forward, my routine changed. Mornings were for keeping up appearances. Evenings, I became a student again. I pored over Robert's papers like sacred texts, teaching myself about investments, rental income, property values. I discovered Robert wasn't just careful, he was strategic. The apartment building wasn't just profitable, it was sitting in a district about to explode in value. He had seen it years ahead. And then there was Edward. Oh, Edward, my son-in-law, who had always treated me like an inconvenience at his dinner table. Mr. Peterson's quiet investigation revealed the truth. Edward was drowning in debt. Loans, credit cards, unpaid bills stacked higher than their European luggage. He had even used the apartment as collateral, not realizing it wasn't his to begin with. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. By the end of the week, Mr. Peterson's voice carried excitement. "Mrs. Brooks, I managed to track down the buyer of Robert's truck. He's an old friend of mine." Once I explained, he agreed to return it for a small compensation. "The truck is yours again." I closed my eyes, picturing Robert's hands on that steering wheel, the way he used to whistle as he drove. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I need you to prepare one more document, I said. Of course. What is it? An eviction notice. There was a long silence. For your daughter.
Yes, for Angela. Delivered when the time is right. I hung up after confirming the details, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. Robert had given me the tools. Now it was my turn to use them. As I stood by the window that night, looking out at the streetlights flickering on, I thought about Angela across the ocean. She believed she had erased me with a 2-minute phone call. But she had no idea. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. The day after Mr. Peterson confirmed the truck was back in my name, I found myself standing in the driveway, running my hand across the hood as though it were Robert's arm. The Ford wasn't shiny like it had once been. It carried scratches, small dents, a little rust by the bumper. But to me, it looked perfect. I could almost hear Robert's whistle as he hosed it down every Sunday. See him grinning while he checked the oil. It felt like having a piece of him again. And more importantly, it reminded me why I was doing all this not out of spite, but out of love. Strange, isn't it? Sometimes revenge wears the mask of justice, but deep down, it's just love turned inside out. That morning, I sat with Mr. Peterson in his office again. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books, and his pen clicked softly as he shuffled through my growing pile of documents. Mrs. Brooks, he said, adjusting his glasses. The building is almost fully under your direct control now. 2 weeks, at most. And Angela still doesn't know I asked.
No one knows, except us. The sales have been reversed quietly. You own everything.
I leaned back in my chair, letting that truth sink in. I, Antonia Brooks, widow of a bus driver, had become the silent owner of an empire. Meanwhile, my daughter was sipping lattes in Europe, blissfully unaware she was squatting in my building all along.
Good, I said finally. Now let's talk about something else. That power of attorney Angela tricked me into signing. Can we fight it? Mr. Peterson looked uneasy. It's difficult. She had you sign during a vulnerable time, but legally speaking, you did sign. It'll be her word against yours unless we prove intent to deceive.
And what do you think? He hesitated, then gave a small nod.
I think we can prove it. If we show a pattern of manipulation, it builds a case.
Then do it, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I expected. That night, sitting alone in my kitchen, I thought back to the day Angela shoved those papers in front of me. I had been so lost in grief after Robert's funeral, barely able to tell morning from night. She'd leaned over me, her tone sweet, saying, "Mom, these are just to make things easier. and I'd signed without a second thought.
It's a cruel truth. The people who know you best also know when you're weakest.
But weakness, I decided, is not permanent. It's like a tide, you can drown in it. Or you can wait until it recedes and leaves you stronger for having survived it. The days stretched into a rhythm. To the neighbors, I was still poor Antonia. They'd wave at me with pity, whisper behind their fences. Aurora dropped by with casseroles wrapped in foil, speaking in that soft, pitying voice. Don't worry, dear. Everything will be all right. If only she knew I spent my evenings with spreadsheets, bank statements, and deeds. If only she knew I was plotting not just survival, but an education for my daughter, the kind no university could offer.
Here's a quirky fact I stumbled across during those late-night readings. The word apartment comes from the Italian appartamento, meaning a separated place.
Funny, isn't it? Angela thought she had separated herself from me completely, and yet she was living in my apartment building the whole time. Academically debatable or not, I couldn't help but laugh at the poetry of it. One Friday evening, Mr. Peterson called. Mrs. Brooks,
I've completed the transfer. You now have total control of the building. And the eviction notice.
It's ready, but I must ask, are you sure she's your daughter? I looked out the window at the fading light. I'm more sure than I've ever been. He sighed. Very well. I'll keep it on hold until you give the word. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Robert's voice echoed in my mind. Sometimes the only way people learn is when life hands them the bill they thought someone else was paying.
And that was the moment I knew. The eviction wasn't just paperwork. It was the first domino in a line I had carefully set up.
That night, I dreamed again of Robert. He was sitting on the porch of the beach house, legs stretched out, a fishing rod leaning against the railing. He turned to me, his smile soft.
You're doing it! Antonia, you're showing her!
I woke with tears on my cheeks, but they weren't sorrowful. They were the tears of someone finally stepping into the role they had been avoiding all along, the role of teacher. Angela thought she had discarded me like trash. She had no idea I was about to become the lesson she never asked for, but desperately needed. Angela had been gone for barely 3 weeks when the neighborhood gossip machine delivered the first crack in her perfect European adventure. Aurora, bless her curious heart, came knocking one afternoon, her apron still dusted with flour. Antonia, she whispered, glancing around as though spies might be hiding behind the hydrangeas. I heard from my brother-in-law at the bank. Edward's in trouble. Big trouble. Loans, collateral, all tied to that apartment they live in. I feigned surprise, covering my mouth. The apartment.
Yes. Apparently he borrowed heavily.
but the banks discovered he doesn't even own it.
Can you imagine? Oh, I can imagine, I said softly, hiding a smile. Aurora leaned closer. They say Angela might have to come back soon to sort it all out. Edward. Well, some people think he never intended to return at all. I thanked her, closed the door, and poured myself a cup of tea. So, Edward was unraveling faster than I thought. And Angela, she was about to discover just how fragile her European dream really was. That evening, I called Mr. Peterson. It's time, I told him.
You're sure? Yes. Deliver the eviction notice to Angela's apartment. Hand it to her directly when she returns.
As you wish, he said.
I slept soundly that night, knowing the first domino was tipping.
2 days later, Aurora appeared again, nearly out of breath. Antonia, she's back. Your Angela, I saw her last night. Alone, only one suitcase, looking pale as a ghost. She had to beg the superintendent for the spare key because she didn't even have her own. Edward never came with her. I stood by the window after Aurora left, staring at the streetlights flickering on. My daughter was home, but not the daughter I had once known, the one who strutted in heels, full of arrogance and Edward's borrowed confidence. This version had been carved down, stripped of her illusions, and soon she would learn the truth about the ground beneath her feet. The phone rang the next afternoon. Mr. Peterson's steady voice came through. Mrs. Brooks, the letter has been delivered. She accepted it in person.
Perfect. How long? 30 days, as per legal standards.
I nodded to myself. Plenty of time for her to sweat. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, imagining her expression as she unfolded the letter. Confusion at first, then disbelief, then the creeping panic that always comes when you realize the world isn't what you thought it was. She'd probably think it was a scam or some mistake. But when she checked, she would learn it was real. That's the cruel beauty of truth. It doesn't ask for permission. At 8 o'clock sharp the next morning, the phone rang again. I didn't even need to check who it was. Mom! Her voice cracked, high-pitched with panic. I need to talk to you urgently. I stirred sugar into my coffee slowly. Good morning, honey. How was Europe? Mom, I don't have time for that. I got this letter yesterday. It says I have to vacate my apartment in 30 days. It has to be a mistake.
Oh, from whom?
From some company I've never heard of. Robert Investments, Inc. Do you know it? I bit my lip to keep from smiling. Robert had named the company after himself. How poetic. No, honey, I said evenly. Never heard of it. Are you sure it's legitimate? That's what I'm trying to find out, Mom. I don't know what to do. Edward left me in Europe. He ran off with another woman. And now this. Her words tumbled out like marbles rolling off a table, scattered and panicked. I'm so sorry, Angela, I said softly. my tone laced with the gentlest sympathy I could fake.
"Mom, can I come see you? Please, I don't have anyone else."
The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. She had discarded me without hesitation, and now, broken and abandoned, she wanted refuge. "Of course, honey," I said sweetly. "Come over whenever you like." When I hung up, I looked in the mirror. I needed to be ready for this performance. I pulled my hair into a bun, put on my most modest gray dress, and practiced my expression worried, gentle, but weary. Angela arrived an hour later. When I opened the door, my breath caught. She looked nothing like the daughter who had left. Her skin was pale, her eyes ringed with shadows, her clothes wrinkled. For a second, she almost reached to hug me, but stopped short, as though remembering how she had left things. "Come in, honey," I said softly. "Do you want some coffee?"
"Yes, please."
We sat at the kitchen table. She looked so small there, like a child again. Her voice broke. "Mom, I'm so sorry for the way I left, for the things I said. I treated you horribly, and now I have nothing." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. And for just a moment, my mother's heart betrayed me. I wanted to pull her close, to wipe away the tears. But then I remembered her cold voice on the phone the day she sold my life out from under me. I folded my hands and said quietly, "It's all right, honey. We'll figure something out." Inside, though, I knew this was just the beginning. She thought she was coming back to find safety. What she was really walking into was her education. Angela's suitcase sat by the door like an unwanted guest, a scuffed thing, its zipper barely holding, a far cry from the gleaming luggage she had proudly packed into the cab weeks earlier. She looked around the house timidly, as if she were trespassing. Her old bedroom door creaked when she opened it, and I caught the flicker in her eyes, the mix of shame and nostalgia. "Mom," she said softly, "do you mind if I stay here just for a little while, until I figure things out?" I smiled, the kind of smile that hides more than it reveals. "Of course, honey, this will always be your home." Her shoulders slumped with relief. She didn't notice the calculation behind my eyes. She thought she was coming back to a safety net. What she didn't realize was that she had landed squarely in the lesson I'd been weaving since the day she hung up on me. That evening, I found her at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. Her voice cracked when she said, "Edward lied to me about everything. There was never any business opportunity in Europe. He just wanted to escape his debts." I poured her some tea, letting the steam rise between us like a veil. "And you believed him?" She flinched, then nodded. "Yes, I thought he loved me, but he left me for a girl half my age. A waitress he met in Paris. I didn't say what I wanted to that I'd seen through Edward years ago, that his arrogance smelled of desperation from the start. Instead, I leaned back and let her words hang in the air. It was tempting to console her, to reach across the table like a mother should. But this wasn't the time. A wound has to sting before it can heal. Over the next days, Angela tried to busy herself around the house. She cooked dinners, simple things like pasta or chicken, but they tasted faintly of guilt. She folded laundry with too much care, as though trying to erase the past with neat stacks of towels. One evening, she appeared at my side holding a manila envelope. "Mom, I found this among Edward's things. It has your name on it. Did you know about this?" My breath caught. Another envelope. Robert's handwriting again. Steady and sure. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling. Inside was a short note and a small brass key. "Antonia," it read, "if you are reading this after the first envelope, it means our daughter is in trouble. This key belongs to a safety deposit box at the downtown bank, number 247. Use it wisely. It will help you help her." Angela leaned over my shoulder, her voice hopeful. "A safety deposit box, Mom. Maybe it has something valuable inside. Maybe this is the answer." I forced a neutral tone. "Perhaps. We'll see tomorrow." That night, she barely slept. I could hear her pacing the floorboards of her old room, the same ones she used to stomp across as a teenager when I told her she couldn't stay out past midnight. Funny how time loops back, reminding us of who we once were. The next morning, we took the bus downtown. Angela clutched the envelope as though it were a life raft. At the bank, the clerk checked my ID, then guided us to the safety deposit room. The metal drawers gleamed under fluorescent lights, humming faintly with secrets. The box 247 clicked open. Inside was a velvet pouch. I lifted it out, untied the string, and gasped. Jewels, rings, necklaces, earrings. Some I recognized from Robert's family passed down through generations. Others were entirely new to me, shimmering with stones I could only guess at. Angela's eyes widened. "Mom, this must be worth a fortune." According to Robert's note tucked inside, the collection was valued at nearly $200,000. Angela clutched one of the necklaces with trembling hands. "With this, I could pay off Edward's debts. I could finally breathe." I studied her. Even faced with treasure, her first thought was still Edward. Still the debts he had left her drowning in. "Think carefully, Angela," I said softly. "Once you sell these, they're gone. Forever." "What choice do I have?" she whispered. Back at the house, she spread the jewels across the kitchen table like candy, calculating aloud which she could part with. To her, they were lifelines. To me, they were reminders. Robert hadn't just left her a lifeline, he'd left me the means to test her, to see if she could climb out of the pit Edward had dug. That night, as she bent over her calculations. I poured myself a glass of Robert's old wine, the one he'd saved for special occasions, and I thought the lesson has begun in earnest. Angela believed she was salvaging her life. She didn't know she was stepping deeper into the classroom Robert and I had prepared for her. The next morning, Angela was already at the table when I shuffled into the kitchen. The jewels were laid out neatly, each piece resting on a folded napkin as if she were running her own little pawn shop. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes hollow from another sleepless night. "Mom," she said without looking up, "I've been researching prices. If I sell everything except the engagement ring and Grandma's necklace, I think I can get close to $180,000. She spoke quickly, her words tumbling over themselves, as though saying them fast enough might erase the shame behind them. I poured coffee into Robert's old mug and took a slow sip. "And what will you do with that money?" "Pay down the debts. At least the ones with collateral. The banks are threatening foreclosure. And if I don't pay, they'll come after me for everything." Her hands trembled as she picked up a pearl bracelet, the one Robert's mother had worn every Easter. She didn't see it as family history, she saw it as currency. "Angela," I said gently, "once you sell these, you can't get them back. They're part of your father's legacy." Her eyes filled with tears. "And what good is a legacy if the banks take everything if I don't pay something? They'll garnish my wages before I even find work." I didn't argue. Sometimes silence teaches more than words. That afternoon, she made the first sale. She came home hours later with an envelope of cash. Her shoulders hunched, her face pale. She set it on the table and whispered, "I never thought I'd be the kind of person who sells my family's jewels, but I guess I am." I didn't correct her, because here's the thing, life has a way of showing us who we are when the floor caves in. Over the next week, Angela repeated the process. Jewel after jewel disappeared. Each time, she came home more exhausted, more hollow. By the end, she had $180,000 in cash and 2 pieces left the engagement ring Robert had given me, and her grandmother's necklace. She held those back like lifelines, though I wondered if even they would eventually find their way onto a jeweler's counter. One evening, she sat across from me, stacks of bills spread between us. "I'll pay the worst debts first," she murmured, "the ones tied to property or collateral. After that, I don't know." She looked up at me suddenly. "Mom, I ruined everything. I ruined Dad's legacy. I ruined your home. I even ruined myself. I don't know how to come back from this." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time since she'd returned, I saw not just desperation, but genuine regret. Still, I kept my role. I folded my hands, gave her a tired but patient smile, and said, "People make mistakes, Angela. The important thing is what you do after." That night, after she went to bed, the phone rang. "Mr. Peterson's calm voice greeted me. "Mrs. Brooks, I have an update. Edward owes more than we initially thought. Over $200,000 spread across banks and private lenders. Worse, some loans were taken with your daughter's forged signature. That makes her legally responsible." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "Can you prove the forgery?" "Yes. We've gathered enough evidence. With this, we can clear Angela of liability. But the legal process will take time. Expensive time." "How expensive?" $50,000. At least. Maybe more. I glanced at the kitchen table, where Angela's cash still sat under the dim light. "Do it," I said firmly. "Don't tell her. Not yet. Let her believe she has to stand on her own first." "As you wish," he replied. When I hung up, I stared at the silent house. Angela believed she was fighting alone, clawing her way out of the pit Edward had left her in. But behind the scenes, I was pulling strings, just as Robert had pulled strings for me. It was a strange kind of love, the kind that teaches by letting someone fall, but never letting them hit the ground too hard. Here's an odd fact I read once. Mother elephants sometimes let their calves struggle in mud pits before helping them out. They know that learning to fight builds muscle, but they'll never let the calf drown. That night, I thought about that. Maybe I was more like those elephants than I realized. Angela thought the jewels were her salvation. She didn't know they were just another lesson. Angela counted the bills 3 times before finally stacking them into neat little bundles. The kitchen table looked like something out of a crime show, money lined up, documents scattered. The faint metallic gleam of her wedding ring still clinging to her finger as if refusing to let go. $180,000, she said in a shaky voice. "It should be enough to hold off the banks for now." I nodded, watching her shoulders sag under the weight of her own words. For a moment I saw not the woman who betrayed me, but the little girl who once sold lemonade on this very street, proudly jingling 50 cents in her pocket. Back then, she thought 50 cents could change the world. Now, $180,000 looked like loose sand slipping through her fingers. "You've grown up fast, honey," I said softly. She gave a bitter laugh. "Fast, more like too late." The next days blurred into a cycle of Angela running to banks, meeting with creditors, and returning home more drained each night. She taped notes to the fridge lists of which debts to prioritize, which deadlines loomed. The handwriting I remembered from school permission slips now looked frantic. Letters slanted like they were trying to outrun her fear. One evening, she dropped her purse on the floor and sank into a chair. "Mom, I went to 3 job interviews today. 2 said they couldn't hire me because of my credit issues. The 3rd offered me a part-time cleaning job at night. Offices. It pays almost nothing. But," her voice cracked, "it's something." "Are you going to take it?" I asked. She nodded, swallowing hard. "I have to. I can't just sit here and do nothing. I need to earn at least a little dignity back." I wanted to tell her she didn't need to scrub office floors at midnight, that Robert's empire was quietly shielding her already. But I bit my tongue. This was part of the lesson. That night, as she prepared for her first shift, she looked so different from the Angela who once strutted in designer heels. She wore plain sneakers, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, an old sweatshirt I hadn't seen since her college days. She caught me staring. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, smiling faintly. "You just look real." She rolled her eyes but smiled back, a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. When she returned at dawn, her shoes scuffed and her hands raw, she collapsed at the table with a glass of water. "I met a woman named Mrs. Johnson," she said. 60 years old. She's been cleaning offices for 20 years. Her husband left her with 3 kids. She told me this job isn't glamorous, but it gave her independence and dignity. Angela rubbed her temples. She told me something I can't stop thinking about. She said there are 2 types of people in her line of work, those who ended up there because they never had chances, and those who had chances but ruined them. She asked me which one I was. I leaned forward. "And what did you say?" Angela gave a weak laugh. "The truth. That I had every chance in the world. A family who loved me. A stable home. An inheritance. And I ruined it all chasing a man who lied to me." Her eyes filled again, but this time with something sharper than sorrow clarity. "Mrs. Johnson told me that admitting the truth already puts me one step ahead of most people, but it doesn't erase the shame." I reached across the table, resting my hand lightly over hers. Shame can break you, or it can build you. It depends on what you do with it. She squeezed my hand back. "I want to build. I don't ever want to be that woman again, the one who called you from the doctor's office and treated you like trash. I don't know how you even let me through this door." I didn't answer, because the truth was, even as she said those words, part of me was still torn. My heart remembered the sting of her betrayal, the cold tone in her voice. But my soul remembered Robert's last letter. "You are rich, my love. Use it to help her, but use it wisely." That same week, Mr. Peterson called with the update I'd been waiting for. "Mrs. Brooks, we found Edward in Paris. He's trying to gain residency through a sham marriage with the young woman he left with, and we have evidence of his forgeries. This is enough to clear Angela of all responsibility for his debts." My hand trembled as I held the phone. "And how long will the process take?" 3 weeks, perhaps 4, but once it's complete, she'll be free." "Good, but don't tell her anything yet. She needs to believe she's carrying the weight until the last possible moment." "As you wish," he said. After I hung up, I looked at Angela bent over the table, calculating bills with a tired determination. She had no idea the invisible safety net was already beneath her, stitched by Robert's foresight and my secrecy. And for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt the faintest glimmer of pride. She wasn't there yet, not fully, but she was closer than she had ever been. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window as Angela sat hunched over a folder of loan documents, her fingers tracing the pages like someone trying to read a foreign language. Her eyes looked older than her 39 years, weighted down by nights spent scrubbing offices and days battling creditors. "Mom," she whispered, almost to herself. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." I set my coffee cup down gently. "You've done more in these few weeks than you've done in years, Angela. You've faced things head on." She gave me a sad smile. But what if it's not enough? It was time. I called Mr. Peterson that afternoon. "Schedule the meeting." I told him. My voice was calm, steady. "Angela needs to know." He cleared his throat. "Friday morning, then. Bring her in. I'll have everything ready." When I told Angela, she looked terrified. "Mom, I don't have money for a lawyer. I can't afford even an hour in an office like that." "Don't worry about that now," I said. "Just come with me." Friday came, gray and drizzly. We walked together into Peterson and Associates, Angela's steps hesitant, her shoulders hunched. She looked like a defendant awaiting sentencing. "Mr. Peterson greeted us warmly, shaking her hand. "Miss Brooks, thank you for coming. Please, sit." Angela nodded nervously, clutching her worn purse. I can't pay for this consultation. My situation is..." He raised a hand. "We're not here to talk about fees. We're here to talk about your future." He slid a thick folder across the desk. "This is the result of our investigation. Edward forged your signature on several loans. We have the evidence. Legally, you are not responsible for his debts." Angela blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a child hearing her first unbelievable story. "Not responsible." "That's right. With this, you're free." Her eyes filled. She turned to me. "But who paid for all this? I never." "Mr. Peterson looked at me. It was my cue. "Angela," I said softly, "there's something you need to know. Your father left me more than you ever realized. Much more." I slid a second folder across the desk. Inside were Robert's deeds, bank statements, company shares, all the pieces of the empire he had built in silence. Angela's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Her face shifted from confusion to shock to disbelief. "Mom," she breathed, You're the owner of the building I lived in. You have all these properties, investments, bank accounts." "Yes." Her eyes widened. "So when I sold the beach house, it was never yours to sell. It was mine all along, and I got it back." The silence that followed was thick. Angela closed the folder slowly, then looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "How long have you known?" Since the day you called me at the doctor's office. You knew," her voice broke. "You knew I was drowning, crying myself to sleep every night. And you just let me." I leaned forward, my tone calm but sharp. "Yes, because you needed to learn. Angela, you needed to understand the value of what you lost, the value of family, of respect, of trust. You took everything from me with a 2-minute phone call. Do you know how that felt?" She nodded quickly, sobbing. "Yes, I abandoned you. I treated you like garbage. And if I had handed you money the moment you asked, you'd have kept living like nothing happened. You'd never have learned. This," I gestured at the folder, "was your education." Angela wiped her tears, staring at me with something new in her eyes. Not just guilt, respect. "Do you forgive me?" she whispered. "I forgave you long ago," I said gently. "The question is, can you forgive yourself?" "Mr. Peterson cleared his throat politely. "Miss Brooks, your mother has paid all legal expenses. You're free of Edward's debts. You owe nothing." Angela let out a sob that shook the room. Then she laughed through her tears. "I've been scrubbing floors for pennies, and you..." She stopped, shaking her head. "No, you were right. That job taught me more than any check ever could. I won't quit. Not yet. I need to prove to myself that I can stand on my own 2 feet. For the first time in months, I felt Robert's presence in the room, as though he were standing behind me, nodding. My daughter was finally beginning to see not just me, but herself clearly. The air felt different after that meeting in Mr. Peterson's office. Angela walked beside me down the marble steps, holding her purse like it weighed nothing for the first time in months. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. The drizzle had cleared, and the city shimmered as though it too was washed clean. When we finally reached the bus stop, she turned to me. "Mom, I think I understand now. Everything you did, everything you didn't do." I met her gaze. "And what did you understand?" "That you didn't save me with money. You saved me by letting me fall, by letting me feel what it's like to be discarded, the same way I discarded you." She swallowed hard. "It was cruel, but it was also the kindest thing you could have done." Her words sank into me, and for the first time since Robert died, I felt a deep peace. The following weeks brought change I hadn't dared imagine. Angela kept her cleaning job, insisting she needed to finish what she started. "It's not punishment," she explained one night, tying her sneakers. "It's proof to myself that I can stand on my own, that I'm not the spoiled woman who sold her parents' house for a lie." And she meant it. She came home tired but steady, her hands blistered, her eyes brighter. She even began helping her co-workers, slipping them grocery money or paying a daycare bill with the same cash she had once used for designer handbags. One evening on the porch, she told me, "Mom, I want to study social work. I want to help women who go through what I went through. I can't erase what I did to you, but maybe I can use it to do something good." I almost cried right there, because I could see it, Robert's daughter, finally awake. 6 months later, Angela finished her first semester of classes with top marks. Meanwhile, I established a small foundation using Robert's fortune, dedicated to supporting women facing abandonment and financial abuse. Together, Angela and I ran programs, using our home as a meeting place. And the beach house, our sanctuary, became more than just a memory. One morning, Angela proposed, "Let's turn it into a shelter, a place for women to heal, to rebuild. It's what Dad would want." She was right. Robert had always opened our doors to anyone in need. Now, his legacy would live on in a way even he might not have imagined. The day we reopened the beach house, we stood on the porch, the sea breeze tugging at our hair. Angela looked out at the waves and whispered, "I thought I lost everything. But really, I just needed to lose myself to find who I was supposed to be." I slipped my arm through hers. "You found more than that, Angela. You found your family again." We spent that evening cooking together in the kitchen, laughter spilling out of open windows. Neighbors dropped by to congratulate us, but it wasn't their approval that mattered. It was Robert's presence, felt in every nail he had hammered, every board he had sanded, every corner of that house that had carried us through summers and storms. That night, after Angela went to bed, I sat on the porch alone with the stars overhead. Robert used to tell me that stars were reminders, pinpricks of light from souls who had lived fully, shining down to guide us. I looked up and whispered, "We did it, Robert," she finally learned. And for the first time in months, I felt not just peace, but gratitude. Not for the fortune, not even for the victory, but for the chance to rebuild my daughter. Not as the child I had raised, but as the woman she was finally becoming. Justice hadn't come through courts or punishments. It had come through patience, silence, and the courage to let my daughter walk through fire. And when she emerged, she wasn't just healed, she was transformed. And so was I. This story began with betrayal. Sitting in a doctor's waiting room, I learned my only daughter, Angela, had sold my beach house and my late husband Robert's beloved truck, using the money to chase a fantasy life in Europe with her husband Edward. That phone call cut deeper than any knife. But grief quickly turned into clarity, because Robert, even in death, had prepared me for this moment. He had left behind hidden documents, properties, investments, and a fortune Angela knew nothing about. With the help of Robert's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, I quietly reclaimed everything Angela thought she had stolen. I became the silent owner of multiple properties, including the apartment she lived in, while continuing to play the part of the poor, discarded widow. It was more than revenge, it was a lesson. Angela's dream life unraveled. Edward's debts and lies sent her back to me, desperate and broken. I let her move in, watched her sell jewels, scrub offices at night, and cry over bills. Each choice carved humility into her, teaching her what no lecture ever could. All the while, I was behind the scenes, pulling strings to ensure she wouldn't be destroyed, only changed. Finally, in Mr. Peterson's office, I revealed the truth. Robert had made us wealthy long ago, and I had allowed Angela to believe we were ruined so she could understand the value of family, respect, and love. It broke her, then rebuilt her. 6 months later, Angela had transformed. She studied social work, kept her job to honor her growth, and helped others facing the same despair she once knew. Together, we turned the beach house into a shelter for women seeking refuge. What began as betrayal became rebirth. In losing everything, Angela found herself, and in teaching her, I found peace.